You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 80, Speaking Croatian. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. This week, we're speaking about Croatian with Uncle Mike, Tony D, and DJ Moe, the hosts of the Let's Learn Croatian podcast. I've been listening to the Let's Learn Croatian podcast for a while now, and I've always loved the energy that these three bring to their episodes. And I'm so happy that we had a chance to talk about the Croatian language and culture. In this episode, we talk about grammar of the language, including its cases, and the diacritics that affect the sounds of the language. We talk about dialects in Croatian and how they change both throughout the country itself and in the Croatian diaspora in other parts of the world. Uncle Mike talks to us about things that he enjoys teaching Tony D about the language, and Tony D and DJ Moe tell us how they are enjoying the process of learning the language. They tell us how they started their podcast, and fun fact, we even learn about some connections between Croatian music and Mexican music. I really encourage all of you to listen to this show, whether you're learning Croatian or not, because their content is just so much fun, and they're great at taking a deep dive through the culture, the language, and the history of Croatia. I've learned so much from them, and I'm sure that you will too. If you enjoyed this episode of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, or like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now support the show on buymeacoffee.com. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I have some special guests today, the hosts of Let's Learn Croatian podcast. How are you guys? And I want you guys to introduce yourselves so we can hear your name and we get used to your voice as we're going on through this episode.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Uncle Mike. I am the teacher of Let's Learn Croatian at the time. Yeah, so hello.
And over here, I'm Tony D. I'm the student and the postier. I do all of the mail and writing, and I get to learn a lot of stuff. But that's me over here, Tony D.
And I'm DJ Moe. I'm the guy who kind of sits in the background and pokes fun at these guys while they're learning and trying to teach and all that good stuff. But I also do the Super Slacko Report, which is the culture part of the show. And yeah, just a lot of laughs and a lot of good times with these.
You do all the engineering and sound work as well.
Yeah.
And website.
And website.
Yes.
So everything else.
Yeah, we all have our role to play.
That's great. And I'm so excited to talk to you all about Croatian. And I just want to say, I love listening to your podcast. It's so much fun and it's so accessible. And I learn a lot, even though Croatian is not one of my languages, but I really enjoy listening to the three of you. And I've learned so much about Croatia from all of you. So that's the first of probably a lot of gushing I will do about your show. So I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Well, this is Uncle Mike. I'll go first. My first language growing up was Croatian. So I was born in the States, but my parents were both born in former Yugoslavia, the Croatian part. So up until kindergarten, I spoke a little bit of English, but it was dominantly Croatian. So with my family and, family's family. So Croatian was my first one. And then later on in life, I learned Spanish in high school, and then I learned German in college, and I'd done some French for podcasting fun, but that's kind of all fallen off the wayside. And now with the podcast, with learning Croatian, I've been trying to learn my Croatian a little bit better because I learned a certain dialect that's not the main dialect. So my Croatian is trying to get stronger, but yeah. All the while trying to maintain a decent English.
Yeah. And as for me, Tony D here, my main language I learned was actually just English. So Southern California English, I guess. So a lot of my growing up, I'm Mexican American, so my family spoke Spanish, but primarily to keep things from me. So, so it wasn't necessarily to
You
teach
still
me.
use that one, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
But I learned Spanish in high school, so it was more like the Spain Spanish, like the proper Spanish, Castilian Spanish.
Mm.
So some of that I practice and I try. So very broken Spanish for me.
Yeah, I was also Mexican American, so I grew up in a household where my parents mostly spoke Spanish to us kids, but us kids all spoke English to each other. But we understood Spanish well enough where they couldn't hide stuff from us, which is good.
Yes.
But for the most part, those are my two languages. You know, essentially, like my mom's half the family also Mexican American, but they all spoke English. And then my dad's side of the family, they all spoke Spanish. So depending on like whose birthday party we were going to, I had to turn on a specific language.
Yeah.
And then in high school, I opted for the easy A for Spanish class, and it was really hard.
Yeah.
I'm with Tony D. Like, who's still learning Spanish in Southern California?
Mexican Americans.
Yeah,
Spanish and get a B.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I got too. I got a B. I was like, good B. I worked for that B, but not easy.
Solid B.
But yeah, I was like learning vosotros and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My dad's never said that in his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my language journey. Obviously learning Croatian with these guys, and my wife, she's Croatian as well. So I'm trying to drop that on our kids. So kind of the inception of the podcast a little bit there, but I'll save it for later.
Okay. How did you, Mo and Tony, how did you come to learning Croatian with Mike?
This kind of stems back to where we live. So we live in Southern California in a really kind of like hotbed, if you will, for a lot of Croatians, because if I'm wrong, Uncle Mike,
no, you got it. Yeah.
Essentially, a lot of Croatians felt that this is a very similar to where they grew up in Croatia. And so a certain part of Croatians move here because they're used to the ocean, they're used to the fishing, they're used to this kind of like climate. Am I right?
Yeah, San Pedro, definitely.
Yeah, and so because of that, most of my friends in high school were Croatians, and this guy being one of them. And so because of that, I've always had like Croatia kind of like circling me, you know, whether I liked it or not, you know. So hence my wife being Croatian, because, you know, that's just who was around, you know, and I felt we're Croatian, that kind of thing. Anywho, that's kind of like how I've always had it around me. So like, I remember in school, I would talk to a friend that just got back from Croatia. They would be raving about how awesome it is there and this and that. And it wasn't just one person. All my friends are Croatian. They're all going back and coming back and all that stuff. So it's always been around me. Tony?
Oh, so for me, I actually met you two gentlemen through my cousin that lives here in San Pedro. So meeting these two guys brought me into that kind of culture of the Croatian language and whatnot. But Uncle Mike actually started this way back when, I don't remember when there was a couple little lessons that we recorded. It was just because I had no idea what the language of, you know, Croatian language sounded like, or even how to pronunciate anything. So I was the perfect student to mess things up and to get things, you know, get things right. So
yeah, I did 3 kind of like pilot episodes just to record, because I was learning, I think it was Coffee Break French was a podcast that I was doing for a second. So I just kind of mimicked them, and I did 3 Croatian lessons for my younger cousins who were going to visit family in Croatia. And then Moses, all of a sudden, I just kind of shared those with people who were going to Croatia. And then Moses is like, hey, let's make it a little bit more serious. And I fought tooth and nail. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, but here we are.
Yeah. Perseverance.
Yeah.
Perseverance.
So when I listen to your show and I learn vocabulary and I learn about culture, about, you know, the language and the culture of Croatia, and me not having any like exposure to Croatian at all, the things that I hear now, I didn't say this to you guys before, but my languages are French and Italian. And I hear, when I listen to your podcast, I hear a lot of similarities to Italian, with some maybe like roots and maybe even with pronunciation in, you know, some words. For you guys who speak Spanish and have exposure to Spanish, do you notice any kind of similarities in the pronunciation or with any vocabulary of Croatian and Spanish? And I know that's a far-fetched question, but
it totally isn't. Like just in like the whole, like, I'm no linguist, but like I know Latin is like, the granddaddy of all languages in most cases. And that kind of stems throughout. So you're going to get that in Spanish, you're going to get that in Italian. And obviously Croatia being so close to Italy geographically, there is some carryover there. But I think trying to answer your question, but also kind of make it a little bigger, if this helps you or not. We're all musicians, by the way, we all play music. The music from Croatia, the traditional music, sounds almost verbatim as the Mexican music that I grew up with, that my dad grew up with.
Really?
So, like, no joke, his good friend growing up, also Croatian, he in his car, like, he's totally Croatian, listens to the Mexican stations over here because that makes him feel more at home, with what he grew up with or what they played around his house, because the music is so similar. And that obviously language is the way to communicate, but so is music. And so for me, like, hearing that, I'm like, I even told my dad that, and my dad was like, let's hear it, So like I pulled up some stuff that he showed me on YouTube and stuff like that. And my dad's like, that's something that I would listen to.
Yes.
Where's the radio station that they're releasing here?
Yeah.
But
well,
pretty cool.
Really quick history to that. In Yugoslavia during the 60s and 70s, Tito kind of broke away from the Soviet Union, and for that reason was able to bring more Western culture in. And so one of the things they were able to bring in was Mexican telenovelas. So all of the music to those old shows got on TV, and it inspired a lot of the musicians in Croatia at the time. Mm-hmm. So those mariachi, tuba, trumpet sounds that were in Mexican music, they just translated them into accordion and tamburica, like the kind of the mandolin in Croatian. So like, it was like a lot of the same melodies and structures, but just changed instrumentation. So
I had no idea. I've got some Spotify listening to do later.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the language. I know where Croatia is geographically, and I encourage my listeners to look it up if they don't know. But Croatia is surrounded by a lot of different cultures that are also very robust and very strong on their own, as is Croatia. Tell me about linguistically, what are some of the hallmarks of the Croatian language, I guess, that set it apart from the other languages in the region? Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know what? It's kind of a tough question because there's a lot of similarities where in former Yugoslavia, you had Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Croatia, plus others where kind of shared the root language. And then after things split up, as messy as that was, every language held on to its kind of core attributes. But, like if you go to Serbia, if you go to Bosnia and speak Croatian, they'll be able to understand you, but will know that like, oh, you're from Croatia because you're using this word. Like an Aussie will use the loo versus we'll use the restroom, and an Englishman will. It's all of those kind of things where it's a little bit of a click or two away in dialectical terms. And like how you were saying earlier, with Italy, us being across the sea from them, a lot of the islands and villages along the Adriatic coast will share similar words with Italy, with Italian words. So my dad is from a town called Comigia, which is on Otok Vis, which is probably the closest island away from the Italian coast. So over time, a lot of those Italian words flooded over, came through and stuck in the dialect of let's say, Komishki, it's called, right? And so what was interesting for me was growing up, I learned some of those words in that dialect. And then when I took Spanish in high school, I was like, wait, I kind of recognize some of these words. And then I was realizing that it's like, oh, like obviously Spanish and Italian are very close, very similar in a lot of aspects, where all of a sudden in Croatian, which is a Slavic language, I'm understanding some of that. So that was definitely a lot of a crossover for that. Other countries, like let's say Greece, I can't touch Greece. I can't touch Greek. I mean, Hungarian, those languages, I don't see any, whenever I look at those alphabets and all that stuff, that to me, I'm lost. But when it comes to all the former Yugoslavian countries, I can do pretty well. Like Slovenian is a little bit different, and I see that and I just don't understand some of the words. But so yeah, there's a lot of overlap. Like for a Croatian, you will add an ending and you'll change the case. So you'll change to genitive or accusative or dative case. And tense, obviously tense will change, you know, like let's say in English we have, I will run. So like there's different ways of saying that in Croatian. So a lot of things get inflected on the ending. So in learning Croatian, it's really important to learn the root of the word, because later on, you know, through repetition, you'll be able to see, okay, that's the masculine, feminine, neuter, or that's present, that's past, and that's going to give your case as well. Very complicated, so we're not really touching that in our lessons, because it's really something you just sit down with someone who knows way more than I do. I'm definitely not a professor, so learning kind of beginning Croatian, I want everyone to have the building blocks of eventually down the line, you'll recognize the root, and then you'll be like, okay, something else is happening here. Where as a kid, it's stuff you pick up and you learn because you're in the situation so much. But as we get older, that's really hard to remember. Really hard to remember. Yeah.
So for Tony and for Mo, how are you dealing with a language that has cases?
Well, for me, I'm just kind of going along with it.
I would say they're not.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle, just because, I mean, it's nice. It's nice to go through it, especially with Uncle Mike teaching, just because it's all new to me. It's all fresh. So I can kind of mold what I'm saying and how I'm saying it to what he's teaching. So that's the benefit. But as far as having any of it retained, it's just a matter of practicing saying it, repeating it. I think some of the Post-it note ideas of putting stuff on things and, you know, just kind of being more familiarized with it, I think that's really helpful. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult language.
Yeah, for me, I was just there, and knowing, well, trying to absorb as I could.
Just where?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just in Croatia about 2 weeks ago, I think. Was it 3 weeks now?
Yeah,
I got back. But knowing what I know now, it's different. You know, you hear it differently. People use things differently, and so kind of going back to what Mike was saying, with knowing the root word really helps. And so for me, like in conversation with somebody, and I took about maybe like 5% of the people's conversations in and kind of understood them. But what I understood were the words. And like sometimes I wouldn't be able to, you know, fully understand them, but I knew what the subject was. I knew what was kind of happening, but I wasn't able to like fully like, oh crap, I didn't learn that far ahead yet. You know? But I kind of know that they're asking for something and I can get it, you know, that kind of thing. So it's just, I think it's the practice and hearing it and being able to utilize it, because essentially we're teaching it just one way, you know, and it's up to the listener to kind of go, oh, I want to take this further. And so obviously we're not offering that yet, you know, but
I'm not sure if I know how to teach it, to be honest.
True. And let them dive into it how they like to, you know. I obviously got by, you know, with what I've learned so far. And so I'm sure a lot of folks could.
How many, I'm going back to the cases because I can't let this go, but how many, so I asked that question because I struggle with cases. And even though, and I've said this before on the show, but I took 4 years of Latin in high school. And it was probably the first 2.5 years before I really understood like what the cases were for. And that's not because I'm stupid, but it's because it's not part of English, and it's not part of any other Romance language that I'm familiar with. So it's, you know, and I can't wrap my head around it. And I really applaud people who can. I think that it's just, you know, you have to be dedicated to figure it out. But I know some languages have more cases than others. How many do we have in Croatian?
I'll be honest, I don't know exactly. I don't know. There's at least 8. And for the sake of the show, we stick to nominative case. So I am, you are, she is. And then we try to add, you know, the adjectives with feminine and plural and possessive. We're actually going to just start today. So these guys are going to be really excited about that.
Yay.
But I didn't, you know, growing up learning English, that kind of grammar, I never touched it until I started taking German.
Right.
And in German, it was like, okay, nominative case, accusative, dative. I'm like, what are we talking about here? And not until I started learning that language that I started learning English a little bit better, where you can kind of get into you see the formulas that other languages have that they don't really, you know, they don't teach us that much in English, or they just don't worry about it because we're learning other subjects so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I wish you all luck when you do get to the point where you're
Thank you.
getting to know those cases. What about orthography? What about the alphabet? There are letters that I see when I'm looking at written Croatian that I don't recognize, and therefore I don't know how to pronounce them. How many, or I mean, if there's like an overabundance, you don't have to give me a number, but what letters, as I guess as we're learning Croatian, as we're becoming familiar with the language, the diacritics that we see in the alphabet, what are they and how do we pronounce them?
Well, so we had an alphabet lesson not too long ago, and Croatian does not have the letter X, doesn't have the letter Y, and it doesn't have the letter Q, and I might be missing one. So it has, the X sound they will use KS, and the Y in Croatian is a J. So Yugoslavia used to be spelled Jugo. Like that's how. So every sound in Croatian that's a Y sound is spelled with J. So now they also have an S sound, let's say in Sam, and then they have, this is very standard. So we have another S it's called a kvačica, right? So it's a little kind of like a tilde like you have in Spanish, but it denotes that it's an SH sound, right? So they're not going to have like spelled out shame. It'll be SH. It'll have that SH letter. So there's definitely there's the S. There's three different C's, right? So there's a ts, and then there's a noch, and then there's a chuyesh, right? So there's a different way that you pronounce the ch sound because they don't have ch as well, right? So there's different ones that go in different spots. They call it a hard C, a hard ch, or a soft ch. Whether learning that, it's a bit tough. So, and even when I hear it, I don't even hear the difference, right? So then we have the j as well, which is like, let's say D as in door, then you have a D with a line through it. It makes it a j sound, right? So there's a couple of those. Then you have an LJ, which makes it a y. So Ljubav, the word for love, is LJUBAV, right? And then also NJ, which is nya. So like, Russian, they have nyet. So nya for the word Germany in Croatian is Nemachka. So it starts with NJ. So there's at least 4 or 5 ones that are strictly in the Croatian language that English has nothing on them. So what's also interesting too is when you hear a Croatian speak and you hear them say the letter, they don't have the letter W. So when they say what is it, they say what is it, right? Because it's right. It's very similar to the V where they don't naturally do that w sound, So there's a lot of sounds that they're not used to saying. Same with us. So whenever I'm trying to teach the guys here, a lot of the sounds that they make are towards the front of the mouth. Say
like very hard sounding words of letters.
Some I would say soft toning because you press the tongue against the back of your teeth, right? So instead of saying a door where your tongue is hitting the top of your mouth, you would say door where the tongue is hitting the back of your teeth. So a lot of the sounds are towards the front of your palate, let's say. Okay. So yeah, I know I kind of veered off in the letters. So there are a handful of those that, we don't have in English and we definitely need to learn different. But they're not hardcore staples where they only occur like a DZ and the Z's got a line through it is a hard J. And then there's a soft J. So they're not super, super used often. So you can kind of live without really not, you don't have to worry about it too much. You can kind of cheat your way out of seeing it occasionally, which is, it's nice to have cheats in a language. So, and also for Croatian, the way it's spelled is the way it's pronounced. So it's very phonetic. So we're not going to have the word knight where you have, the Knights of the Round Table, KNIGHT. All of those letters are quiet. What's the word? Are silent. In Croatian, knight would be spelled NAJT. N-A-Y-T, night, right? So there's no tricks. There's no silent, like in French, you have E's on the end and S on the end will change things and complicate things, which steered me away from French. So, yeah.
Okay. I love this. This is so interesting. What have been so far some of your favorite things that you have taught and some of your favorite things that you have learned about Croatian language?
Like things that we've learned. Well, for me, I do the super soccer reports. And so I kind of hang back in the lessons. I allow Uncle Mike here to teach Tony, because that's the experience the audience is tuning in for. So I don't want to step on that unless I got something really, really important joke that I want to get in there. That's really where what drives me on these shows. But the super soccer report is kind of where I kind of tune into and like work on. And so I'm all culture. So for me, every time we do any show, I try and find something interesting that I don't know. And I'm putting my hands up because like I don't know everything, obviously. So I'm a newbie to this, but I do know some because again, I grew up around a lot of it. And so a lot of times I'll find something that someone told me years ago, and I'll find it just by searching my Croatia stuff online, and then I dive into that. And so there's just so much history. And so some of the stuff that kind of really kind of sets me off, if you will, down the rabbit hole online and keep me up till 3 a.m. is just like, I'm a history major, as I grew up, so I graduated with, so I love that stuff. And so Croatia and that particular region has changed hands so many times over the years. It was obviously settled by the Romans and the Greeks, and then obviously under Venetian rule, and then obviously stuff that was happened more closer to our time frame with like the stuff Mike was talking about with Tito and all that stuff. But I love the real crazy stuff that we found this church, on this island that was settled by the Byzantines, stuff like that. And this monastery is still there today. You can go visit. Things of that nature. That's what really impresses me and really kind of takes me down other rabbit holes. And it's just, for me, that's kind of my favorite thing. Like, I love finding so many different cultures. Starts, there's so many starts to so many cultures in one place. And so there's this one spot, it's called Trogir, and it's like a small island. It's attached to Croatia by land, so you can actually like drive to it. And this is like the most cultural diverse place in like all of Croatia. It's on the water. So this particular part of Croatia was settled by so many folks. And you can walk through this I think it's like 1.5 miles long. It's not a very big island, but so many different cultures settled there. And so you can find Venetian, Roman, Greek, all within like a 2 to 3 block radius.
Wow.
And it's all from different spans of time. And it's there for anyone to go see right now. So you don't got to open a book to see this stuff. You just got to take a short walk. That's amazing, man.
It's a museum island. Yeah, you're going to see architecture,
it's goes all over the place.
Yeah, you name it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
Tony D,
how do I follow up?
Well, like focus more on the language. I mean, the great thing about Tony D is when we're learning lessons, he's full-time silly mode. So whenever he hears the word like danas is the word for today, Tony will say don nuts. And he's got these silly ways to remember a word, which work.
Yeah, it really does help. There's so many. Honestly, everything for me has been the most interesting with Croatia, because I'm always hearing facts. I heard a few new things today. Just on this interview. So maybe they said it before, but I just wasn't listening to them.
That'll happen too.
Yeah. But I think with the culture, DJ Moe is super Sako, hearing things about, how they harvest salt in an area, or the caves, the cave that's in the center of an island, or the big giant, what is that, water? It's like a lake.
Yeah.
The lake that's in. So there's so many things that I hear, and obviously I've never been there. I learned all my information. I have to trust these guys, so I trust what they're saying is true.
Yes,
not just making up all these cool stories.
That'd be really cool if we could do that. Made up a country,
and then I just go there and it's just a desert and nothing there.
Yeah.
But everything I hear, I study and look at through these two is very, very interesting. And then the language itself, just hearing it and understanding it and then retaining it and surprising myself. That for me is super cool. Like just the structure, the way things are said, and then just, giving me a pat on the back for like actually paying attention.
Wow. So we set our standards low here. Real low. Our goal of the show is to get Tony a one-way ticket to Croatia. So that's, getting it back home is on him, but that's kind of the goal. Goal of the show.
And, very good strong swimmers.
He may want to stay there because everything I hear about Croatia is that it's gorgeous. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and you, Mike, what about teaching? What about teaching these two about the Croatian language? What are some things that you've enjoyed and you've loved the most about it?
Well, it's been, I've had experience with teaching. I had a really interesting experience. I lived in Mexico. That's probably been close to 20 years now, where I taught Korean kids how to speak English in Mexico. So there was a Daewoo factory down in Querétaro, a city, and there's about 50 or 60 Korean families. So I was teaching English to kids that spoke Korean at home and then Spanish at school. So I've had experience with teaching kids who absorb stuff really easily and who are kind of forced to learn. And when I'm teaching my friends here, Mo and Tony, I mean, we all have full-time jobs. So I have to realize that they're not studying 10 hours a day like I would want them to, but maybe 1 hour before our lesson. So I have to be a little bit more patient. Yes. Yes, maybe, no, maybe half an hour. So, right, yeah, and then, you know, our palates are formed, so pronouncing certain words isn't going to happen. So trying to be, you know, patient with that. But the interesting part is also for me is, you know, I didn't learn from professors at home. You know, my parents and my family was very working class, and like my dad doesn't have more than a eighth grade education. My aunt was sixth grade, or maybe sixth and fourth. So some of the Croatian I learned was very, very, very basic. So even when I go there now, like I'm going next month, thankfully, to see family. It's been 8 years. Whenever I get there, we speak our dialect and I'm fine. But once I turn the TV on and start watching the news, I'm lost because it's that academic, a little bit more professional. So if we talk about professional stuff, business stuff, medical stuff, I can't hang. So it's been really important for me is to teach them this basic stuff that they can learn, that they can speak to people from all around the country, let alone the Croatians they might come across here in the States or LA for that matter. I know New York has a big Croatian population as well. So my goal was to just get the basics down, get those building blocks down, because those are super important, and it's always just that small bridge. That's a really small bridge versus all of a sudden saying these perfectly grammatically perfect sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I always like to hear what people enjoy learning about a language, because or sharing, in your case, like sharing something that you grew up with in your home, like sharing your culture in that way. So I think that language is a way for us to, you know, culture is meant to be shared. And I think language should be as well. So I love hearing that. Mike, you talked about growing up speaking a dialect. Tell me about dialects in Croatian. Aside from your dialect, I can't imagine how many there are actually in Croatia, but are there dominant dialects of Croatian, and how intelligible are they with one another, if you know?
Well, there's three major dialects. So it's called Čakovski, Kajkavski, and Štokavski. So it's kind of the same way to say, you know, the question word what. Some Croatians will say što, some will say ča, and some will say kaj. So it's the same word, you know, pronounced, you know, obviously 3 different ways in 3 different dialects. So all depending on what town you're in and what part of Croatia is what the dominant dialect will be. They've all agreed now, since it's been a country now for over 20 years, that they have, it's called književni, which is the actual proper dialect that they teach in schools, that they speak dominantly, let's say in the news, or that's the proper way spoken, that, you know, everyone is learning. So, you know, like kind of how that's happening with native languages here in the States is the old dialects might slowly die away if everything is kind of mainlined and mainstream into one thing. So it kind of really lands on the people of certain parts of the country to keep up their dialect. So for example, my mom's island is, I think there's about 12 towns on the island where the dialects differ on every town. Because, you know, in whatever it was such a long time ago, where traveling from one town to another would be, now it's a 5-minute drive, but it used to be an hour walk. So, you know, villages kind of didn't they didn't come in contact with each other too much, maybe during trading or let's say, fishing on one side where people would interact, but a dialect would start to become really developed and really singular to one place where my mom's dialect is one certain way. And then 2 towns over, you have this dialect that, everything everyone's saying, but it sounds like they have like a New York accent, like a total, New Yorker style accent. And then you go up, 2 towns the other way, and it's still, again, they're using different words to say different things. And then my dad's town, Comijat, is super unique because it's got that, it's 2.5 hours from the coast by ferry. So back in the day, if you were taking a rowboat, who knows how long that would have taken, right? So that island, that town was so separated for such a long time. It had the Italian influences, and then, the dialect developed where, let's say, British English, Americans will say little and they'll say little, right? They'll leave the T's out. That's kind of happening on that island, in that town, where instead of saying, they would use the Tchaikovsky, so they would say cha, but then they would kind of also butcher it a little bit and say tsa. So that they would change things little by little by little. Where this village now, every year there's a show on Croatian TV, on Croatian national TV, about this village that has its own dialect that hasn't died out, that has its own traditions, where every year on a certain patron saint's day, they'll burn a fishing boat for good luck for the fishing season, right? So the dialects are big time heavy. And I think Moses' father-in-law, he's still able to, he can tell what island you're from, let alone, let's say, oh, that's the Bosnian dialect, or that's a Serbian dialect. Those old folks, that old generation is really, really strong in being able to point out certain places from certain languages. And it comes with last name as well. My aunt can tell you by your last name what village or what town or what island you're from. So that's definitely kind of how things rooted for a long time. Things are changing now. A lot of people are leaving the villages and living in the big cities, let alone coming to different countries for work. A lot of Christians now are going to Ireland. 40, 50 years ago, a lot of coming to the States, Australia, Germany. So we're all over the place. I think the diaspora is bigger internationally than it is in Croatia itself. So yeah, so that's kind of interesting too, where you'll hear the Komiški, which is my dad's town, you'll hear that dialect more here in San Pedro, maybe, than you will in Croatia itself, because a lot of people in Croatia now are people from outside moving in, because so many of the let's say the people who were originally from there have left, so they're kind of filling in and bringing their own languages. So it's an interesting way things have been processed going forward.
Right. Okay, Mo, you talked about being into the culture, and you're the one that does all the research and the history and all the things that you found. What are some things about Croatia, I guess, that or that you found? As we know, Croatia's history being a part of, I'm going to say Yugoslavia, and I always hesitate, but I know it's Yugoslavia, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I still have a map somewhere at my parents' house that says Yugoslavia on it.
Yeah.
I love to look at old maps and see how, regions change and things. To the question, as this region broke up and there are, surrounding countries that have similarities with Croatia, what have you found, or what do you know that sets Croatia aside from every other country in that region? What are some things that, if I'm looking at this, I know instantly that this is Croatian and it's not Slovenian or Serbian or Montenegrin, etc.?
I think, well, just from my experience, and again, I didn't grow up there or anything like that. Just me learning off the internet and from him and my in-laws and my wife. It's a mix, it's kind of hard to differentiate, I always go back to music and food, because my two favorite things. So from the cuisine, just looking at the food and having been there and had it, and I'm only talking about the Dalmatian area because that's the island, that's where my father-in-law's from, and so we go there. But from the food alone, you get Italian out of that, you get a little bit of Mediterranean out of that, you get a little bit of Eastern European out of that, some of the root vegetables are utilized in different ways, obviously a lot of seafood. So for me, like just looking at that, it's just like, I can't just say this is Croatian food because I wasn't exposed to Croatian food as a kid. So I don't know. I don't associate that as Croatian food. I associate it as like, oh, there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But everybody else, this is Croatian food. You know, this is what it is, you know? And so for me, like, I'm always trying to pick it apart and understand it. And so kind of to your question a little bit, what part comes from which, I'm like, it's all kind of meshing together elegantly, in my opinion. The food there is amazing. They've got that farm to table thing down. Like, I know people pay extra for that here in the States. Like, literally, that's all they do over there. And so everything is like fresh and amazing. And it's just like, these flavors just meld together so well, so rich in texture and flavor. And just, oh man, just on a visual to give you a plate. You want to take a picture of it like an Instagram or something. But I just dive in. But the food there for me is just like, it speaks to the region, if you will, and all the folks that have come and made it what it is today. It's really, really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it comes to differences, definitely religion is different. So, I mean, Italy and Croatia are both Roman Catholic, but Bosnia is predominantly Muslim. Serbian is Orthodox. So those are certain days of the year that we're not going to share the same holidays. Where in Croatia, you know, like your Saints' Day is an important holiday. Obviously, Christmas, Easter are important holidays versus other parts of the country that are not. But within Croatia, when it comes to, let's say, food or, you know, seasonal stuff, like, let's say, if you're on the coast, you're going to have, you will tend to have a more predominantly fish-based diet, right? And if you're in like, let's say, on the other side of the mountain, or, you know, you have Veli, but there's a huge mountain range that kind of like borders the coast, you're going to be more farm and more, let's say, pork oriented. So prosciutto and those kind of sausages will be predominating too. So that's a little bit of a different diet. And, you know, what are some of the staples? And for that reason, that's, you know, small regional differences. So I could say that there are some, but yeah, Moses was kind of saying they do overlap a lot, you know, gracefully, which is kind of the awesome part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Tony, what are you looking forward to when you finally get to visit Croatia? What are you looking forward to experiencing?
Well, there's a number of great things. One specifically is buying some kikiriki, which is peanuts in Croatian. So that's a funny, silly word that I learned and think it's hilarious to say. But being able to experience all of what these guys talk about, and, you know, the photographs that we have, or that we share on our podcast and on the website, just seeing all those things and being able to firsthand the experience, you know, seeing the sea urchins and, you know, enjoying meals, you know, just listening to like the environment. I've never been international, so that'd be a first as well. So being out of the country would be great. But yeah, some of the stuff like, for me, that speaks Croatia, or like the, you know, the olive trees and the lavender and we talk about bees, like the honey from the bee farms and
the summer cicadas. Yeah, the summer soundtrack.
So a lot of that, the sea organ, like that, I want to see. You know, there's so many. There's a long list, and I don't think I'd you know, be able to fit it all.
I think that's a couple of trips, by the way.
Yeah, maybe.
You're all over the place. And I'm so happy if you can do that, to be honest. I really want you to experience it.
Yeah, so I'm just excited for any of it, you know, in person.
I was looking at pictures of Croatia, getting ready for this episode, and I can't believe, like I've said this twice already, I think, like how gorgeous it looks. Just absolutely stunning. And I feel like I feel like Croatia is under the radar. I don't know why, but I feel like I hear people talk about their destinations, and I never hear people say like, I'm going to Croatia. I want to go to Croatia. And I think about it, and it's like, why not? Why not? Because it's gorgeous. As we talked about, we're going to talk about food. So let me okay. But the food is delicious. It's beautiful. People are lovely. The weather is supposed to be like the best weather, like consistently, of any country in the world. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true.
Wow. I got two notes to what you just said. So the like people saying like, oh, well, Croatia, why are you going there? So when I first went to Croatia, I remember I told my boss, oh, I'm going to go on a 2-week vacation. Oh, great. You know, they think like road trip or something common that most people do, you know, with kids. And they're like, oh, where are you off to? I'm like, Croatia. Like she literally like hung up and she's like, okay, yeah, have fun on Croatia. Didn't know where the heck it was. Told her boss, like vice president, like, oh, you know, he's going to Croatia for 2 weeks. He's like, where the hell is that? That's what he said. And they both had to like stop and Google it and where it is. The next time I spoke to them, they were so like enamored with the idea of how far we went, and with all the pictures they saw online, they're like asking me more questions about it than I've ever talked to them in my life on personal matters, you know. And so that's just one little note on it. But the second note, you said you're looking at pictures online. Go to our website, check out every picture there. That's from people that we know or myself of places that we've been, and it is exactly as beautiful as you see. You know, wow. It is to the point, like. That's the coolest thing about making this podcast for me is I'm a photography nut. So a lot of those pictures are from myself, his cousin, people that we met online that are in Croatia or near it enough to take pictures for us to submit to post. So these are all original photos of people that are actually loving exactly what we're talking about. And that's what I wanted to do is I wanted to showcase how awesome it is that this place exists. You can see it and you can touch it, you can feel it, you can walk it and just really get there, because otherwise you're looking at like, you know, like a travel site, you know, and it may be the same thing you've seen so many times on like a pamphlet or something, but these are different photos. You know, these are like some of the stuff we just posted on our most recent page is literally from the 1,000-year-old village my father-in-law's from. Like literally everything's made out of this limestone that's been there for I want to say eons, but it hasn't been eons, but it looks like that, you know, and it's just like it's another experience, and I highly recommend it. I don't want people flooding it because I don't want to ruin my spot.
I was going to say that. Hold on.
It's a terrible place. Don't ever go there. Ever. Well, I was thinking though, maybe one of the reasons why so many people don't go there is because most places like you go to France, it's like, oh, Paris is the spot. You know, Italy, Spain. There's specific
go to Rome, or
specific
go to Barcelona.
areas that you go. But Croatia, like you can go all along the coast, everywhere, all the islands. There's something everywhere. Even that little tiny town that you can, what is it, like a mile long?
Trogir,
yeah. So there's so many different things spread across the entire Croatia. So I think maybe that really isn't like a destination specific spot, and people are just like, I don't know, there's too much, so maybe I'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah, in Europe, Croatia is definitely a tourist or like vacation spot for a lot of Polish families, Slovenian, Russians, Germans, and Italians, English as well. So a lot of the Americans that have been going there have some kind of connection, whether it's family. And I think only recently, I think that under the radar thing has been, like spoken of for the last 20 years. We're like, oh, Croatia is the new spot, where kind of what Tony is saying, like, we don't have a Paris. We don't, like there's big cities that are beautiful, but it's more of like the complete package versus, oh, we're going to go to the Louvre in Paris, or, we're going to go see some old castles or old churches like the Vatican in Rome. So it's kind of general, where you're like, oh, we have to go to Disneyland. We have to go to the Disney World in Croatia, this place. We don't have that one location spot. So
I want to talk about your podcast, which I said at the start that I really enjoy. I think that you guys are so much fun chatting with each other, and it really comes across how much fun you're having and how much you enjoy talking about Croatia and the language and the culture. You talked about how you got started, but tell us some of your favorite things that you've talked about over time. Maybe some of your favorite lessons, or some of the favorite like trivia that you've found, or maybe some of the the vocabulary and the words that you've learned, and maybe some of the highlights.
I get to go first, because for me, when I teach a Croatian word to Tony, and I know it's going to be a silly one, when I call him Mr. Giggles, when the giggles come out, I know I've got a good word. Kikiriki, kukuruz. There's some words that are fun to say that here you go, like here's the giggle master will happen. But I know for me, some of the favorite stuff that we've done is we've done some skits where we'll try to incorporate all of the, let's say the last 10 lessons, we're going to try to make a skit happen where we incorporate as much as the vocabulary that we've learned into a skit and we kind of act it out, and we got
podcast theater.
Yeah, podcast theater. We have, some Foley art happening. So we have all those things. That's always a great challenge. We've done some songs where Moses and I will play guitar and we'll
accordion too.
Yes, we'll vocally butcher it, but we're trying to make it work. So that's really fun for me. So,
for me, I really love the in-between stuff. So like, I know the lessons are great, and I know the Super Slocko culture part is amazing. But like, I really enjoy like the banter in between. Like, and I'm gonna full disclosure say this one. Our very first email from our fan or anyone reached out to us, and they told us only do the lesson, stop talking in between. And I remember it sticks with me because it was our very first email. And it was
burned in there.
It's just my mind. You're the first one. And ever since then, like, it just sticks with me. I'm like, who wouldn't enjoy this? Like I love this part.
That person did not.
Yeah, that one person did not. And we never heard from them again. And maybe they still listen. I don't know. Maybe they warmed up to us. I don't know. But that's my favorite stuff. Like Tony and Mike, myself, this right here, 20 years. All three of us, 15 years. Like, that's a lot of, like us joking around outside of this that comes into the show. And it's just hanging out with people, especially during COVID. Like, we didn't see anybody but us three. Like, at least I didn't. And so it's just nice seeing your friends and hanging out and just having those experiences. And like, I hope that the audience who does write to us, and we've got a lot of folks that reach out to us, is feeling that too, and like, is hanging out with us. I want them to feel like, oh, I want to see those guys one day. I want to bump into them, I wanted to say what's up or whatever, because I think those are the kinds of connections that people don't usually get with the podcast. Sometimes it's very static, like, oh, I'm listening to so-and-so talk to this star, and like, I don't know either of these people, but they're kind of interesting, so I listen. But I want to feel incorporated somehow, and I think Mike does an excellent job with the lesson, and I try to do some of that with the facts and culture.
DJ Moe.
That's the only comment.
Compliment, right?
It's all right. It's one. Well, people can definitely see us in puppet form on our YouTube channel, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I think as far as the podcast, like creating the podcast, it's, for me, it's pretty, I feel like there's a lot of weight on me having to learn stuff. So it's kind of tough, but I don't really retain much.
Yeah, well, you don't practice and it shows. That's all it's to it.
But not everybody's going to practice.
But part of his job is to ask good questions. And how are you going to ask good questions like when you remember everything?
If I already
remember everything,
learn stuff, how am I going to?
Moses trying to save Tony here. It's so funny too, because DJ Moe like first came with the idea to me sitting at the same table, and I remember being like, no man, that sounds like a lot of work and I don't know what you're talking about. Then I was like, you know what, let's try it. For like, in the back of my mind, like, okay, let's do it. But in the back of my mind, I was like we're going to be 3 months. It's going to go nowhere. And then here we are. It's going to be 2 years next month in September. Mm-hmm. So it's worked out, and it's been really, really fun. And
for me, it doesn't feel like work or anything like that's really important or serious, because
you don't write the lessons.
Well, I mean, I do some stuff. I'm the student, remember?
Right, you're the social media guy too.
Yeah. But for like hanging with you guys, being able to create this and put it out there for everyone to see, the music that you guys write, the stuff that we do creatively together, like the YouTube channel and the photographs and all that stuff. That's all very, very interesting. And I mean, I'm learning through all of that too, learning a lot of the practices of editing and everything, and being able to present it to everybody. It's very neat to see how responsive everyone is and how appreciative everyone is. And since I do like the mail segment, the posta, hearing people, the comments that they write in, stuff that has influenced their, jumping back into their culture that they lost because, it's like their third generation, Croatian in the United States or in Australia or Canada or wherever they are. Brazil is South America. Yeah. That's crazy. Like, people listen to us in South America and they're learning with us. And then they, they're jumping back into like asking their family about their ancestry and how, they migrated to South America or to, wherever, New Zealand, Netherlands, all of that stuff. Yeah. So being a part of that and being able to share all of that with these two dudes, it's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great Southern California thing, right? These two dudes is super cool, right?
I mean,
I think people
that's my Southern California English.
We have some people who've written to us who are saying that, as much as like we have Croatians that write to us, who's like, you know what, like I speak Croatian, but I listen to your podcast to learn English.
Yeah.
Because you know,
I don't know if that's good.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing some of the translation stuff for us, and we can't help but talk like Southern Californians. I mean, I've tried not to as I've gotten older, and Tony has gone the other way and has got, so.
No, but that's good. That's important for your listeners who are learning English, because they don't, if they're outside of the US, who knows who is exposing them to English and where this person is from. And I think it's really important when you're learning a language to, especially one like English that is spoken in so many different parts of the world natively, it's important to familiarize yourself with different accents and to understand how people, because if this person learned from someone in like Indiana, okay, no shade to Indiana, but if they're going to come to the States, they're probably going to visit California. Like everybody wants to visit California. So,
right.
Or New York.
Or New York, right. So you're
porn a lot, right? Porns in New York a lot.
Oh, that's all they do there. You're right.
Absolutely right. We do that here, but
we speed to our stoplights here in California, in Los Angeles. That's sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you gotta learn.
Yeah,
little things.
Yeah, so it's valuable that they're picking up your SoCal English. It's
Thank you.
It's part of the the American experience, I think.
For sure. Yeah.
So for people listening, please let us know where we can find you and where we can send you some posta.
Yeah, posta. Well, our website is letslearncroatian.com. So on that, you have all of our lessons that we've done from day one. We have actually a compiled vocabulary list, kind of like a translation dictionary that we've compiled. All of our podcasts are there. The podcast is up on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play. I mean, everywhere.
Spotify.
Anywhere you get your podcast from. We're on there, right? So we have, we're on Facebook, LLC Pod. We have Instagram as well, LLC Pod. We kind of stopped doing Twitter, didn't really get enough action there. We have a YouTube channel where we take the language part of our podcast and put three puppets that look like us. The one in the middle is very handsome, just like this situation right here. Uh-huh. And and we act out, the lesson part, and we add subtitles so you can actually see the words written. So that's helped for the visual learner.
And that's helped me a lot too, because I'm putting the captions,
right,
and then I get to see it how it's spelled, and then hear it over again, and it's spelled way differently than what it sounds like.
Yes.
A lot of the times. So
and then email, we have info@letslearncroatian.com, and we just recently started selling merchandise. We got into that world. We have shirts, we have beanies, we have shirts for kids. We're doing Patreon supporters page, just because having a podcast is kind of expensive. Didn't really know that until we got into this. Yeah. So that's kind of the entire thing. I'm not sure if I'm leaving anything out, guys.
Maybe one thing that we try and keep the podcast as clean as possible. So we want everyone to enjoy it. And just from my own standpoint, I want my kids to listen. And obviously, they're on there, by the way. You can hear them. They have a couple little segments on there.
Yeah.
So I want all families to tune in. I want parents to feel okay playing this in the car on the way to school or soccer practice or whatever. Same thing goes for the YouTube videos. We catered it towards that. But we've got a lot of adults responding, saying, "Oh, this is cool. Thank you for these." Obviously adults, typing. I'm assuming. There's some very good kids with small fingers typing. But we made a playlist so a parent can just press play on the first one and they'll play all the way through, so the kid can absorb it, in their own way. And we want that to be like a family show. So that's first and foremost. That's kind of how we did this whole thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's really cool. And then the second thing I wanted to plug, and something we don't ever plug, is that all the music you hear for the intros, outros, little things in between, it's us. We've done everything.
Homemade music.
All homemade music. So
yes.
Mainly because we don't want to pay for anything, but but we also we're not terrible musicians.
We're not slouches.
We're not slouches. So I thought that was kind of cool to know.
We definitely, the show is catered. I remember beginning, I'm like, you know what? I felt uncomfortable teaching people, a language that I don't have any schooling in, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to cater it towards teaching DJ Moe's kids. So like DJ Moe's daughter is my goddaughter. So I'm like, I'm teaching them too. And then, so it's kind of, I'm going to keep it simple. We keep it clean, obviously. And then the in-between giggles are, you know, universal for all ages, thankfully. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I guess. Sure.
Yeah.
So you're essentially saying that you're thinking I'm like a little kid.
Well, think of
A 5-year-old kid.
Okay.
One of DJ Moe's friends said, actually asked, is Tony D a real person? They thought
I forgot about
they
that.
thought he was a paid actor, that he wasn't real, that it's like one of us speaking in between, because he can't be real. But you see him on camera here. He's
Wait,
real.
He's real.
Yes, well, that's part of, yeah. We haven't talked about that yet.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So for all of those outlets, I think anyone can write to us. They can write, their thoughts on the podcast, if they have any sort of, suggestions or what they might want to hear or what they liked about it. Maybe not so much what they didn't like about it.
But they can send that too.
They can send that too, but I mean,
erase those easily.
hurt my feelings a little bit. Yeah, all those outlets, Instagram, we get a lot of messages through there, through our email address, all that fun stuff. YouTube, all the good likes and stuff are appreciated.
Take those.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I will add links to all of those outlets in the show notes, because
Thank you so much.
I'm sure that everyone listening has had as much fun listening to you guys as I have. So I'm sure people will want to listen to your show and reach out, and I hope they will, and I encourage them to. But yeah, it'll be an easy way for people to just click in the show notes and find you right away in this episode.
Thank you so much, Elle. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So something I actually thought of in the beginning of this episode, and I definitely forgot until now. You mentioned that there is a Croatian population in your area in Southern California. Where do you have maybe festivals or cultural celebrations or expressions of Croatian culture in that area?
Well, here in San Pedro on 9th and Grand, we have Croatian Hall, which is it's also like in between Grand and Gaffey, 9th Street is kind of called the Croatian Place. So there's a Croatian Hall there. It's a big kind of ballroom where people can, have baby showers, and anyone who wants a big area can rent it out. So every year on Independence Day, they'll close off the block. They'll have the diaspora will kind of come through and music will be played. They'll prepare Croatian dishes, and there's some amazing food there. There's also a church, St. Anthony's in downtown Los Angeles, where a lot of, let's say, a little bit more serious Croatians will my friend got married there with his family. They have a great big ballroom there, have reception halls too. So that's definitely here in this San Pedro, LA area. I think the biggest Croatian population is actually in Ohio. And I'm not sure exactly what city. New York has it as well. I was just in Astoria a couple of months ago. I have family that lives there, and we went to a deli that had, Serbian, Croatian, not like cookies and coffee. And so, we have a couple of those markets in San Pedro as well. So that's our local version. And then Mary Star, the church here in San Pedro, I'm not sure if they still do, but they would actually offer a Croatian mass once a week. Yeah, they still do. So yeah, we still have there's some connections here still.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to all three of you. I like to end each episode with the same question, and this is to all of you. Do you have any jokes, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Croatian to share?
I think we have one that I think Uncle Mike will tell everybody. We actually did a little bit of a challenge for our audience on it just recently. And this is also one that my kids have down packed.
Yeah, way better than me.
And then Tony D struggles with it.
I cannot even, Yeah.
And tell us the meaning first, Uncle Mike, and then tell us what this phrase is.
Okay, so this little phrase, it's kind of like a rhyme that you learn. A lot of kids, let's say girls will play. It's kind of like a patty cakes kind of rhyme that you learn, and you play this kind of a hand game where you're counting and learning how to count. But the introduction is, I'll say it first. Okosh, bokosh, purne kokosh, pita maya, koleko tebe treba yaya. So what you're saying is okosh, bokosh. So the word okosh is kind of like a little play on okosh and bokosh are a play on words, because the word kokosh means chicken. So you're saying okosh, bokosh, purne kokosh. So you're saying kind of like two playing words, and the chicken has farted. Yes. And then Pita Maya Koliko Tebe Treba Yaya is saying, okay, this Maya is asking you, so since the chicken farted, how many eggs do you need? So that's kind of the play on the words, like, you know, the chicken has made its sound, it has let something out of itself, and here we have eggs now, you know. So like, and that's kind of the game you play, where if I say 6, the kids will play this kind of like hand smacking game where the last one to be standing is the winner. So that's definitely our fun tongue twister. Okosh bokosh, purne kokosh, pita maya, koliko tebe treba yaya.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah. And for other tongue twisters, Tony loves the kikiriki, kukurus, you know, like there's certain words. Yeah.
It's fun to say.
Yeah. It's fun, you know.
Can you teach me the okosh bokosh?
Okay. So okosh bokosh.
Okosh bokosh.
Purne kokosh.
Purne kokosh.
Got it. Pita maya.
Pita maya.
Koliko tebe.
Koliko tebe.
Treba yaya.
Treba yaya.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a lot of words.
I've been in your place.
Yeah.
Well, you've got the one-way ticket to Croatia, so they're gonna need a third. I'm ready to step in.
But I don't think people understand. One way doesn't mean I get to come back.
That's the whole point. But I foresee like Tony and Elle are going to be on a plane. They're going to show up to Croatia and they're going to say the okosh bokosh rhyme, and the ticket counter people are like, okay, go ahead. Like, that's how you get through customs. You say that, and
or they're like, all right, you're going back.
Yeah, let's hear your accent. Okay, no, that's the entrance exam.
No, thank you so much for teaching me that, because I always like to try and just repeat after, because you know, where else do I get the opportunity to really try? And for people who also want to try it, you know, it's scary to try something new. So I don't want people to feel, you know, afraid. I mean, laugh at me. Don't laugh at yourself. Be proud of yourself, but laugh at me screwing it up. So
that's why I'm here, for people to laugh at, with, hopefully laugh with also. But that's why I'm here, so that they see and hear that it's not an easy thing to learn. And I mean, any language or anything that you do, it's like you definitely have to try and put in that effort. But it's difficult, and if you hear someone messing up or sounding silly or getting shocked or or hit.
Yeah, we do that on our show.
Yeah. I get that a lot.
Tough love. Yeah, do some tough love here.
Firm hand.
Yeah, I mean, your podcast is a really great idea. I can only imagine, how many languages have you covered in your podcast?
I have to count. I don't know.
I would imagine
a lot.
You have a lot of shows, and that's a lot to kind of come through. And learning a language is so much fun, where you're using a different part of your brain. You're going to dig into culture versus like worry about establishing, I don't know, a living. I kind of relate learning a language to like learning music. You are learning something different, and your brain is active in a different way. And it's definitely a joy, a challenge, but a joy.
Yeah. Ultimately a joy.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys so much again for this conversation. Before I let you go, in this situation, after we've been talking for quite some time, what is the best way to say goodbye in Croatian?
I would say doviđenja. So doviđenja is basically until we see each other again. So doviđenja.
Doviđenja.
Yeah, bravo. There you go. Doviđenja.
Okay. My first Croatian words. I'm so proud of myself.
Yes, there you go.
You'll fit right in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elle. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you again. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Yes. Doviđenja.
Doviđenja.
Doviđenja.